I'm Eoin. I'm the head of startups for Africa, the Middle East and Central and Eastern Europe. So I'm over here in South Africa with the lovely team from MO Agency. So I'm going to take the opportunity to maybe explain a little bit about my job, my role, and what does it mean to be the head of startups for a region. So maybe start with the role itself. I'm essentially an entrepreneur in residence within the HubSpot ecospace. And the idea behind my role is quite simple. It's to help companies accelerate growth that are in that early stage of their journey. Early stage has different definitions, but really anything between idea stage right up to a company is about anywhere between 5 and 10 years of age, depending on the stage or the journey that they're on in a funding cycle is probably the easiest way to think about it. So my job is essentially to educate, consult and help those companies get to that level of acceleration and scale as quickly as possible. My background is owning multiple companies. So I set up my first company when I was 17. I ran that until I was 22 and then I had my very first exit. I also ran a multitude of different companies as well as being the head of sales for an edtech startup, which I helped accelerate their growth levels. I think one of the things that's kind of super interesting about the space for me is working with thousands of startups and hundreds of startups all the time. It allows you to have the opportunity to see and understand different business units and actually give real world consulting on what works and what doesn't. So when I think about the opportunity in South Africa, I think it's super interesting in that the resilience of a nation and the way that people think is super cool and super interesting for the, essentially the entrepreneurial journey. So one of the things that I'm always the biggest advocate of the world for, and taking off my HubSpot hat a little bit here, is making sure that things are connected. So if you take one of my own businesses, for example, I ran an e-commerce B2B business for a number of years, and one of the things that we did that worked exceptionally well was the connectivity side of things. And what I mean by that was using a central source of truth like a HubSpot, connecting in the systems that we know or I know over time were to actually accelerate growth. So take example Shopify for my e-commerce payments tool, using systems like Stripe for payments, or going into and using accounting software which make my accountant extremely happy, things like Xero. So making sure that things are connected and they speak to the same language does actually genuinely make such an impact to growth. I am the first person to say that I didn't believe that when I started out my business. I found it hard to let go of control over parts or connect different systems, which meant that over time I was just siloed, which genuinely hurt my growth. When I started connecting systems, it meant that we could scale a lot quicker. So know exactly how many rand I would have made per Google ad, Facebook ad, or business post, or social media post, and actually tying everything back to a return on investment was genuinely probably one of the smartest decisions and one of the reasons I was able to sell my business. So that's a little bit of an insight into the job, the role, and a little bit of my experience in the space. Okay, cool. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is cost, particularly in South Africa and other emerging markets. And I think the way I would look at a tech stack is not looking at it as an individual piece of software or a number of individual softwares. I would think about it as a holistic view. And one of the kind of key things I always say when I'm consulting with startups or scale-ups or other type of companies is we need to look at it from more of a holistic level. So tying everything back, looking at all the different subscriptions, but then tying it back to a very clear return on investment. One of the things that I consistently see when I talk to companies is, you tell me exactly how much it costs you for customer acquisition. And the answer is always, oh, I don't know. And that's scary, right? Because what ends up happening is you end up having a load of pieces of software which are spending and you use it as a cost of the business. But at the end of the day, those costs are there to generate sales or generate marketing leads or whatever that may be, and people do not quantify it. So the first thing that I say to anyone before they look at tech is to start with, what does it cost you to acquire a customer? When you do acquire a customer, how long does it take you to get them to become a customer? And then what is the cost base to get them from that perspective? And the problem, again, I consistently see is that we don't actually tap into that, which means that we're spending lots of money and we get frustrated and we haven't actually looked at the overarching ROI over time. And that's going to be the key thing here. If we look at our growth plans, and everyone's great at writing business plans and cash flow forecasts and all this BS, but what we really need to look at is, how does that interact with our cost units right now? And if we can get that cost unit down by being clever, going to help. But also we need to just think about the software not just as a cost, but what is it going to help us generate, and how much does it cost us per unit, per lead, per customer. So hopefully that helps. So another question that I get asked all the time is, in Africa in general, and this includes South Africa, it has the lowest level of venture capitalist funding. And in layman's terms, what I mean by that is it's really bloody hard to get business money for the business to actually grow. Whether you use friends and family, or you use crowdfunding platforms, or bank finance, one of the other kind of key areas that we consistently see based on our data is that VC funding is massively drying out in Africa. And it's really, really bloody frustrating for the likes of me who's working in this space, because I talk to founders all the time, I talk to startups all the time, and the pieces of tech or the pieces of software, the types of companies that are coming out of here are super, super strong, and resilient is the word I consistently use when I think of South African people. It's resilience, it's overcoming obstacles, and again, in layman's terms, getting shit done. And I love that. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do, and our team in HubSpot is trying to do, is how can we help break down the barriers of why VCs aren't investing over here. If we can cut that down and also give them the opportunity to essentially have easier access to the top tier VCs, or the VCs that are going to invest locally, I think that's going to make your life a lot easier. So we've actually launched a product called Investor Connect, and the idea is to help African founders and founders in anywhere in the world get in front of the right VCs and do it in the right way. And the right way is an interesting terminology, and what I mean by that is doing the pitch decks in a way, learning how to speak and overcome the obstacles that is going to be there for you. So me as an Irishman that's worked in tech all my life, if I really wanted to get VC funding tomorrow for an idea, likelihood is I'll find it an awful lot easier than a founder that's living in Johannesburg that is trying to, again, to accelerate their business. And that's a bloody problem. So we need to break down the barriers, and we need to just showcase African founders and startups in a way that we can really start essentially changing the world and changing the continent, because I think I'm super passionate about that, and I know we are in HubSpot. But the challenge is how do we educate, and how do we make sure that we're putting African founders on a pedestal? And as I said, that's kind of one of the things that my main initiatives here in HubSpot. And as I said, hopefully Investor Connect is able to break down the barriers for us.